Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My partner and I had just finished moving into our new apartment after a grueling week of packing, unpacking, and arranging furniture. We hadn't had a proper meal in days, surviving mostly on takeout and snacks. That Saturday morning, we decided to treat ourselves to breakfast at this local restaurant that everyone kept recommending. We arrived around 10:30 a.m., and as expected on a weekend morning, there was quite a line by the door. There were clear signs saying, "Please wait to be seated," posted everywhere, and everyone was patiently waiting their turn. The hostess had already told us they were a bit understaffed that morning, but we didn't mind the wait. After about 15 minutes, we finally got seated at a cozy booth. We could see the servers rushing around, doing their best to keep up with the morning rush. My partner and I weren't in any hurry. We were just happy to be out of the apartment and scrolling through our phones while waiting for someone to take our order. That's when this family walked in. Mom, dad, and two kids who looked around 8 and 10 years old. Instead of joining the line like everyone else, they just strolled right past all the waiting people. The mom spotted an empty table next to ours and instructed her kids to quickly grab it before anyone else could take it. The kids ran over and claimed the table while their parents followed behind, completely ignoring the dirty looks from people still waiting in line. They sat there looking around expectantly as if they owned the place. After about 5 minutes of not being acknowledged, because, they weren't supposed to be there, they started getting visibly annoyed. The dad kept craning his neck trying to catch someone's attention. He complained loudly to his family about the ridiculous service and how they had been sitting there forever. Finally, he got up and walked to the front where the hostess was managing the waiting list. I could hear their conversation from where I was sitting. The dad complained about waiting at their table for ages without even getting menus. When the hostess asked if someone had seated them, he admitted they'd seated themselves, because there was an empty table. The hostess politely explained about the posted signs requesting customers to wait to be seated, mentioned they were understaffed and busy, but said she would inform their server. She also asked him to please wait in line like other guests in the future. The dad stomped back to his table, clearly not happy about being corrected. He ranted to his family about how the staff was trying to blame them for taking an empty table. They sat there huffing and puffing for another few minutes before the dad finally announced to his kids that they were leaving because the restaurant obviously didn't want their business. When they were getting up, a server who had just noticed them approached their table and tried to explain why they asked people to wait to be seated, especially during busy times when it's hard to track self-seated tables. The dad responded indignantly, asking if they really expected them to wait by the cold windows with children, saying they thought people would be more considerate of families with kids. My partner and I had been watching this whole scene unfold, and I couldn't help myself. I pointed out that everyone else, including other families with children still waiting in line, had waited by those same windows, and that having kids didn't make them special. The dad's face turned red, and the mom started gathering their kids while shooting me dirty looks. She cooed at her children about taking them somewhere that appreciates families more. The server came back to our table and apologized for the scene, but I assured her they were the ones who should be apologizing. She took our order and, as a nice gesture, gave us complimentary coffee for backing her up. The rest of our breakfast was peaceful, and we left a generous tip for the hard-working staff dealing with entitled people like that family. I'm more of a city person, but after my company offered me a position to work remotely, I decided it was time for a change. The housing prices in the suburbs were much more reasonable, and I found this perfect 3-bedroom house with a spacious backyard. Perfect for my hobby of stargazing with my telescope. Everything was going great for the first few months until I met the head of our HOA. Let's just call her Karen. My first encounter with her happened when I was setting up my telescope in the backyard one evening. She stormed over and demanded to know what I was doing. I politely explained that I was setting up my telescope since I'm an amateur astronomer. She immediately claimed it wasn't allowed and was against their regulations. When I pointed out that I'd read through all the HOA guidelines and there was nothing about telescopes being prohibited, she pulled rank. She declared that as president of the HOA, she had the authority to ban it, claiming it could be used to spy on neighbors. I tried explaining that my telescope was pointed at the sky, not at anyone's house, but she wouldn't listen. The next day, I received a notice of violation in my mailbox, completely fabricated, claiming my surveillance equipment was against community guidelines. I ignored it, of course, but that was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Karen made it her mission to make my life miserable. She'd send violation notices for the most ridiculous things. Once, she actually measured my grass and claimed it was 2.3 inches tall when the maximum allowed height was 2 inches. When I asked if she had really measured my grass, she proudly confirmed it and threatened me with a $100 daily fine until it was fixed. She even tried to fine me for the color of my curtains, claiming they weren't an approved shade of beige. They were white. The breaking point came when she tried to have my car towed because it was improperly parked in my own driveway. I had to call the police to prevent the tow truck from taking it. The officer had to explain to her that I was parked legally on my own property. Karen tried to argue about HOA guidelines, but the officer shut her down by explaining that those guidelines couldn't override private property rights. This made her absolutely furious. She started holding HOA meetings without notifying me, trying to pass new rules specifically targeting my property. Other neighbors warned me about what she was doing, but they were too afraid to stand up to her. I decided to fight back legally. I documented everything, filed complaints with the HOA board, the reasonable members, and even got a lawyer involved. Karen was livid when she received the cease and desist letter. She threatened me, bragging about how she'd been running the community for 15 years and would make sure I regretted challenging her. The next day, she had her landscapers accidentally damage my garden while they were working on her yard. I added that to my growing file of complaints. But then something amazing happened. Remember that telescope she hated so much? Well, one night while I was observing a meteor shower, I noticed something peculiar. Several meteors were breaking up in the atmosphere directly above our neighborhood. I got some amazing photos through my telescope. The next morning I woke up to screaming. Karen's house had been hit by several small meteorite fragments. They had punched right through her roof and destroyed her precious living room, including her authentic Victorian furniture, which everyone knew was from a discount store. She immediately started screaming that it was my fault, claiming that my telescope had somehow brought this upon her. When I asked if she was seriously blaming me for meteors, she insisted that because I had been up there every night with that thing, I must have done something to make it happen. When she tried to file an insurance claim, she insisted that I should be held responsible. The insurance adjusters couldn't keep straight faces as she tried to explain how my telescope attracted the meteors to her house. They had to explain to her that that's not how astronomy works, and that this would be classified as an act of God. Even better, when the local news came to cover the story of the meteorite strike, they interviewed me as the amateur astronomer who documented the meteor shower. I got to explain on TV how remarkable it was that the fragments hit such a specific target, while Karen stood in the background, face red with fury. The meteorites caused enough damage that she had to temporarily move out while her house was being repaired. During that time, the other HOA board members finally gained the courage to hold a special election. Karen was voted out as president, and all her ridiculous rule changes were reversed. She still lives in the neighborhood, but now she crosses the street whenever she sees me or my telescope. Some neighbors joke that the universe itself decided to intervene. All I know is that I can finally enjoy my stargazing in peace, and my curtains can be whatever color I want them to be. My boss, who I'm pretty sure irons her socks, is the most obsessive-compulsive person I've ever met. Everything has to be perfectly aligned, color-coded, and measured down to the millimeter. At first, I tried to understand. After all, attention to detail is important in event planning. But there is a difference between being detail-oriented and being straight-up neurotic. Last week, we were preparing for this huge tech conference. I was assigned to create name tags for over 200 attendees. My boss gave me strict instructions about the templates, insisting they needed to be cut exactly on the lines, with no deviations. She emphasized how the client was paying top dollar and everything had to be perfect. I simply assured her I would be careful with them. I spent 3 hours meticulously cutting out those name tags. My hand was cramping, but I pushed through. When I finished, I was actually pretty proud of my work. Sure, some cuts weren't exactly ruler straight, but they looked handcrafted and professional. I brought them to my boss's office feeling confident. She picked up the first one, and her face immediately twisted like she'd bitten into a lemon. She exploded, declaring the work completely unacceptable and demanding I look at the edges. She held up a name tag, her hand shaking dramatically, pointing out how one line was off by at least 2 millimeters and how one corner wasn't even a proper right angle. I tried to explain that they were cut by hand and that I did my best to make them neat, but she cut me off. She started yelling about how my best wasn't good enough and how these needed to be perfect. She kept repeating the word perfect and ranting about how everything in the office must be perfectly aligned. She even threw in a snippy comment about how we weren't running some backyard craft fair. She continued ranting for another 10 minutes about precision and excellence and how her reputation was on the line. By the end, you'd think I'd personally insulted her ancestors. That's when I had my idea. The next morning I came in early. We needed another batch of name tags for the conference's second day. This time I had a different plan. I started cutting the tags, but instead of trying to make them straight, I deliberately made each one unique. Some had rounded corners, others had slight waves. A few even had artistic diagonal cuts. None of them were the same size, but they were all still perfectly functional as name tags. When I walked into her office, I was fighting to keep a straight face. My boss asked hopefully if I had done a better job this time. I cheerfully replied that I had absolutely put a lot of creative energy into these ones. I placed a stack on her desk. Her eyes widened as she flipped through them, her face going through several shades of red. She could barely form words, just stuttering about what I had done. I enthusiastically explained that they were unique, with each one individually crafted to give attendees a personalized experience. I referenced her earlier comment about not running a backyard craft fair, saying I'd gone with more of an artistic boutique approach instead. She threatened to report me to upper management, her voice shaking with rage. I calmly told her to feel free, claiming I had already emailed samples to them last night and that the chief creative officer had loved the concept, saying it perfectly aligned with the conference's theme of innovation through disruption. I hadn't actually emailed anyone, but I knew she wouldn't check. She just sat there, opening and closing her mouth like a fish. At the conference, multiple attendees commented on how creative and unique the name tags were. One person even asked if we could do something similar for their company's upcoming event. My boss had to stand there and take the compliments while looking like she was sucking on a sour candy. The following week, I noticed a few changes. The strict symmetry requirements for office documents mysteriously relaxed. My boss still twitches when she sees anything slightly askew, but she doesn't say a word. I got assigned to handle all the creative projects from then on. My parents got divorced when I was 7. My twin brother and I were left with our dad when our mom walked out on us. About a year later, our dad remarried my stepmother. I'll call her Karen. From day one, she made it crystal clear that she wanted nothing to do with us. You'd think our dad would stand up for us, right? Nope. He slowly started pushing us away too. Things got even worse when Karen got pregnant. Suddenly, my brother and I weren't just unwanted, we were free labor. We became the live-in maids for their precious baby. We had to clean, cook, and take care of our half-sibling while they acted like the perfect nuclear family. Karen would constantly remind us that we weren't real family and should be grateful they kept us around. I once asked if I could go to a friend's birthday party on the weekend. Karen immediately demanded to know if I'd finished all my chores, saying the baby's room needed cleaning and she needed 3 loads of laundry done first. When I protested that I've been doing chores all week without a break for months, she pulled the "This is my house card," and said my father agreed with her. Sure enough, my dad just told me to listen to my stepmother because apparently she knew what was best. But you know what? My brother and I turned that negativity into fuel. We studied our butts off, got perfect grades, and both landed full scholarships to one of the top universities in the country. The day we turned 18, we were out of there faster than Karen could say. But who's gonna clean the house? Fast forward to now, I'm 25 and getting married to the love of my life. My brother, who's still my best friend and biggest supporter, suggested we invite our dad to the wedding. Just Dad, not Karen. I agreed because it was literally the only thing my brother asked for regarding the wedding. When I told my dad he could come but Karen wasn't invited, he insisted they were a package deal. I told him he could consider himself uninvited too then. He said fine, he wouldn't come. The wedding day arrives. We planned everything perfectly. An elegant all-black dress code with one exception. My husband's beautiful white fluffy samoyed wearing a black bow tie. Everything was going great until I heard gasps and snickers during the ceremony. I turned around to see Karen standing there in her yellowed wedding dress from the 90s, with our dad next to her looking smug. Now here's the thing. I'm a gay man marrying another man. There was no bride at this wedding, just two grooms in sharp black tuxedos. Karen started screaming, demanding to know why everyone was staring at her and claiming we were all embarrassing her. I calmly pointed out that maybe it was because she wasn't invited, or maybe because she was wearing a wedding dress to a wedding with no bride. I suggested if she wanted to wear white so badly, she could go sit with the dog, since at least he was actually invited and knew how to behave. My husband jumped in with a perfect comeback saying I shouldn't insult our dog like that since he had much better fashion sense. The entire reception hall burst into laughter. Karen's face turned as red as the wine someone accidentally spilled on her dress moments later. She ran out crying with my dad chasing after her. My brother high-fived me and we spent the rest of the night celebrating with people who actually love and support us. Now Karen's entire side of the family is blowing up my phone and social media, calling me disrespectful and cruel. My brother keeps replaying the security camera footage of her storming out, and we can't stop laughing. My husband's family has declared it the best wedding they've ever attended. Our wedding photographer captured the exact moment Karen realized she was the only person in white at a wedding with two grooms. It's now framed in our living room right next to our dog's portrait. Every time I look at it, I'm reminded that karma really does come through sometimes. Oh, and my dad, he sent a long text complaining that I'd ruined their reputation in the community. I simply responded with a photo of our dog in his dapper black bow tie and added a caption pointing out that even the dog knew the dress code. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.